The idea of funding your first or subsequent deals and having a shortage of cash is a problem that many property developers face, but it's often much more of a mindset issue, and we'll talk about why that is in this video. But what I'm not suggesting, and I want to make this absolutely clear, is this is not a no money down proposition like so many property trainers will promise people in order simply to get them to invest in their programs and spend a fair chunk of money. There are genuine ways in property development to get started with not no money, but with small amounts of money. Now, I will point out that it will probably take you longer to really establish yourself doing this, but nevertheless, if you don't have the funds and you're not able to find an investor to invest with you, then this is a real way that you can do it. But we're going to talk about ways that you can fund your deals and the different ways that you can do that. I talk about that incidentally in my book on page 57 it is, or 57 onwards. We talk about funding and how you fund your deals. You can get a copy of this for just the price of postage and packaging, which is only £2.80. And in addition to that, I've created a land finding course which you'll be invited to join a few days after you've received the book. So let's get started on understanding how you fund your property development deals, particularly if you have limited cash resources as well. And before I start, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then please subscribe now. Only about 15% of the people who view this channel actually subscribe, which is pretty pitiful. So I really would appreciate if you would give us a little subscribe, hit that button, that'd be great. Don't have a large pot of money in order to be able to get started in property development. And it's interesting, what is a large pot of money? Because I have people who come on a call with me who are looking to get started in our programs, and they tell me they don't have a lot of money, and it can often be multiple six figures. And then you've got other people who say that they've actually got quite a large pile of money and it's probably about 20,000. And either of those enough? Yes, they are actually, but the reality is at the lower level, actually being able to secure your first deal without other investment is going to be very difficult. But so what I want to explore first of all is how you would get started in development if you were sort of in that lower 10 to 20,000 sort of bracket. So that 10 to 20,000 pounds is kind of needed for fees that you are going to have to, in other words, professionals that you're going to bring in to the equation. So the way that you'd actually get started in development if your funds are limited is that rather than actually looking to build out the site, you would be looking to source land. So you'd be looking for off-market land, and we talked a bit about that last week, so you can check last week's video out for that. If you source land and you secure it with what we call an option agreement, which means that you don't actually have to part generally with any funds. Sometimes you do have to make an option payment, but that is entirely negotiable. The only payment that you actually need to make in terms of an option agreement is £1 to secure it so as it can be registered. You will obviously have to pay for solicitor's fees to be able to draw up the option agreement, and that's kind of where your money will go in terms of that, and planning fees and bringing in an architect or a town planner to design the project and obtain planning for it. So you can actually source the land. You can then actually sell on the land without necessarily even owning it. So there are other ways to do that as well. But you could actually have a back-to-back transaction. And what you would do is that you would take the profit, which would then give you more seed capital to be able to get started on the next piece of land that you found to perhaps develop it out. So it's a way of actually getting started. And that's why I said earlier it's a bit slower, because obviously the first site that you find, you're not going to actually build it out. You are then going to sell that on. You're going to release the funds back into your bank account to be able to then do another development. The reality is though, however, once you found one piece of land, you can still be looking for the next one. So you can build a land pipeline through this method without having to have a great deal of cash that you need to invest in this stage. So that's kind of how you would do it if you don't have a large pot of money. The second thing is that you might look for investors. Now, a good deal would be 25 to 33% plus of gross development value. Again, we talked about that last week, so I'm not going to go over that, but essentially a good deal is a good deal. So when you are looking at investors, whether you're looking at private investors or whether you are looking at institutional investors like banks or commercial type lenders who specialize in either development finance or bridging finance, and there's a whole array of different types of finance. Again, I talk about that in the book. But the different types of financing available to you, then you are going to need to have a good profit shown in there. Providing you have a good deal, the lenders are going to be interested, autonomous commercial lenders are going to be interested in lending to you. Private investors are going to be interested in lending it to you. Private investor wants two things. They want to make sure that there's a way of getting their money out once the development is complete, and they want to make sure that there's a way of you paying the return that's been agreed for them to get that return on the money that they've invested and the risk that they've taken by investing in you. And so therefore then we go back to commercial loans. So there's commercial type of finance, which as I mentioned before is there's institutional investors. So with development finance, the amount of finance that you're borrowing needs to be $1 million plus to get a development loan. So like a Barclays will lend you that money. A lot of the banks don't. They pulled out after the 2008 financial crisis and never returned to the market. And then there's a whole bunch of specialist lenders who will look at the proposition, and these are available. Again, we have our own sources, but you can do an internet search and looking for development finance. What you do need to be careful of, depending on which country of the UK that you're in, one of the four nations, because they lend to some nations and they don't lend to others. So you need to make sure that that criteria is established right at the beginning. So development finance is generally will give you about 65% of the total value of what you are building out. In other words, your finance needs. And there's lots of ins and outs of that, whether the land's got planning or planning not planning permission. So it's a large subject, and it's not really the subject of giving you all that information on this video, because this would be several hours long. But it's to give you an idea of where you would actually be able to get finance from. And then you've got private loans, and you've got two types of private investment. You've got private loans, which is just like a simple loan process. So you can go to your friends and family, or anybody who you know that might be looking to get a better return than they do in the bank, and it's a simple loan agreement. Their money is not at risk. I mean, there is obviously some risk there, but they're really not at risk because they will be paid out before you would take any profits out of, or you would get, in fact, your money back from the development itself. So as a private loan, there'll be an agreed rate of interest. The interest may be paid as the development progresses, or it may be paid at the end of the development, just depending on what you agree with. And then there's a second type of investor, which is an equity investor, and this is where somebody actually invests in the project in return for a proportion of the profits. Now, there's very strict rules around who can be a private investor, but essentially what they're classified as is a sophisticated investor. So there's there is a minimum income level that they need to be at. There is, if they're running a business, then the business needs to be of a certain turnover size in order for them to be able to lend you that money. So it's a fairly substantial amount. And the reason for this is because they are putting money at risk and they may not get their money back if the thing falls apart. They need to understand that risk, whereas somebody who's just lending you some money, a family friend, a member of the family, may not entirely understand the ins and outs of the risk, and that's why the investor has to be FCA, it has to meet the FCA guidelines in order for you to be able to attract that type of investor, and indeed actually explain to them the project. There's very little that you can actually say to them, so you need to establish first of all that they are a sophisticated investor before you actually start speaking to them about the detail of it. So essentially two different types of investors. I know I've kind of skimmed over this. It is a very large subject, and you certainly find some more details in the book, and also in the land finding course that it comes along with the book, should you choose to subscribe to that, which there's no charge for, incidentally. So hope that's been useful to you. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Give us a like as well for the video, and until the next time, I thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you then. Take care. Bye bye.